Hey everybody, welcome to Beyond the Booth here on Monday night. Hope it's warm enough for everybody out there today. And our we got a special guest with us tonight, the voice play-by-play of Alexandria Valley Cubs, Mr. Robert Smith. Mr. Smith, thanks for joining us. Thanks for taking the time to join us. I know it's a busy time for you this year because of the playoffs and everything, but we appreciate your time.
Yeah, glad to be with you guys this evening.
It's I've heard your voice for many years and everything, and finally getting put a face with a voice. And I want to say it's a lot better than when I put Phil's face and his voice together. I can promise that.
Yeah.
I tell people I have a face for radio, so I don't know about this big stuff.
That's why we do this podcast here. We got faces for radio as well, so that
Yeah,
way if people don't want to watch us, they can always listen to us.
right.
So we was kind of talking before we went live and everything. It's going to be your first trip up to Rainsville to do the Plainview game, Plainview Alexandria game, come Friday night. Are you looking forward to it?
Absolutely. It's always an honor to get to compete in the playoffs, and especially get past that first round and move on. And I've broadcasted from a lot of places around the state over the years, but this will be my first trip to Plainview, and so kind of looking forward to. They have a good team. They're 11-0. Alexandria's 10-1. Alexandria's only loss was by 2 points to Anniston back in September, and so it's something I'm looking forward to.
Have you ever just took the time to sit down and count up all the different locations you've broadcasted from?
I have not, but I know it's a bunch. When I start thinking, you start driving around and going somewhere, and I broadcasted here, I broadcasted there, and whatever. I never stopped, and I would have a hard time guessing how many different places it's been, but it's been a lot of them.
Yeah, I can
Yeah,
imagine so.
Robert, I understand that because back when when I left and went to scoreboard, all the places I'd been, crazy places like been to Danville before, been to Trinity and West Morgan before. It's amazing how that kind of starts. You start plugging in all that into your map of the places you've been, and you'll drive through. Yeah, I've been to there. Here's this goes right here, like Rogersville, over in over Lauderdale County in Rogersville, and places like that I've been to. So, it's kind of neat to think about.
Yeah, it is. If you did a game of the week and different schools play, you'd probably have more places. Have traveled with Alexandria. This is the 38th season that I've done play-by-play for Alexandria, so it's pretty much been where Alexandria has been. There have been a few over the years that there are not many years that Alexandria doesn't make the playoffs, but there have been a few along the way, and we've picked up. I've traveled with Ohatchee, with done some Cleveland County games back in the 90s, in some years that Alexandria didn't make the playoffs, and they did, but predominantly Alexandria, and just wherever they go, that's where I've been.
That's cool. 38 years. Wow. Does it seem like it's been that long?
It really doesn't. No, it kind of blows my mind to think of it. At Alexandria, the legend is Lou Scales. Lou Scales was Alexandria's head coach from 1948 to 1985, which was 38 seasons. He was kind of the Bear Bryant of Calhoun County football, and Larry Ginn, who followed him. You might say he was the Nick Saban so we've been really blessed. But Coach Scales there for 38 seasons, and when I looked to this season to realize I was catching Coach Scales, that just you kind of got to be from there to understand the magnitude of that. But just been very fortunate, and I'm as James Spann says, I'm just getting started.
It's awesome. Phil, I know you got a lot of questions, so I'll turn it over to you.
Well, Robert, 38 seasons of doing football, and broadcasting, you go into it, but there's a lot more reasons than just doing football games. Over time, do you think what keeps you going in radio and doing Alexandria football is the relationships you've made over the years?
It's kind of awesome when you think about that. Not only the relationships at the school, but relationships with so many people. Phil, obviously, I think about you and Jeff Allen and guys that I've known for so long. John Holder, relationships that I probably wouldn't have had if it hadn't been for this. I went to school at Alexandria from all 12 years of high school, and I tell people that I started the school and I've just never really left, and it's pretty accurate. And started broadcasting Alexandria football when I just was barely out of high school, so I really never left. And just loved the place and getting to see. I started my first broadcasting was in the second year of Larry Ginn's time at Alexandria. So, I've known Coach Ginn practically all my life, but then to be able to see all those wins through all the time that he was Alexandria's head coach, and then Frank Tucker followed him, and now Todd Ginn. It's just been a great time to be able to have the best seat in the house and call Alexandria football.
Well, tell me this, yeah, those three are legendary coaches, and of course, right now, it's Todd Ginn. But which of those three was the easiest to interview?
Todd Ginn. I think that would be probably an easy answer to that one. I always say that Todd is the most transparent football coach I believe I've ever seen. And I think some of that is just his personality. Obviously, I knew Todd's dad, know his mom. I've heard some people say that Todd got maybe some of his personality more from his mom than he did his dad. Coach Ginn and by the way, when I say Coach Ginn, we got a lot of Coach Ginns, but the Coach Ginn is Larry Ginn. So when I talk about Coach Ginn, that's who I'm talking about, is Larry Ginn. But he was a great interview, but he was played it a little closer to the vest, and Todd is he's just about the most open head coach that I believe I've ever seen. He's a straight shooter. And another thing is Todd actually spent 2 years on the broadcast with me doing as the color analyst back in 2013 and 2014. He was the head basketball coach at Gadsden State, and did the color analyst on the broadcast with me. So I think that plays into it a little bit. I kind of joke with him sometimes. I say, most people coach first and then they go into the broadcast booth. He was in the broadcast booth before he became the head coach. And so, but I think that he sees it from both sides. He's been up in the booth with me. And, even this year we started something that every week before at about 6 o'clock to 6:10, he's in the radio booth with us. Most head coaches are not going to think about being in the press box. And especially if we're playing away, he'll just come over to the visitor side and come up and do about a 10 or 15 minute interview with us before the ball game. And, I think that's pretty unusual as well. So it just really gives us a good broadcast, I think, this year.
Well, I think coaches have changed a lot in that, in the old days, they kind of sort of kept everything close to the vest, kept everything a little bit secret, weren't really open to pat their kids on the back, especially during the regular season. But, coaches are a lot more about promoting their kids now because, a lot of these kids now that play need positive reinforcement. Used to, it was, I'm going to yank your chain if you don't do what you're supposed to. We really can't do it anymore. So a lot of times these kids need positive reinforcement. So I think that's opened coaches up to promote the kids within their program.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Phil. Our society's had some changes. Kids have changed, and what motivates kids has changed a little bit. And some of these coaches have had to change a little bit with them. You still got to be tough. You still got to keep control. But I think you nailed it right there when you said what motivates kids these days may be a little bit and different than what motivated them a generation or two ago.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right. Well, Robert, I want to back up a little bit, get to know you just a little bit. Tell us, I know, I think you've got two daughters, don't you? You've got grandchildren. Tell us a little bit about your family and a little bit about your background also is how you got into broadcasting.
All right. Well, first of all, my family, I have two daughters. Both of them are graduates of Alexandria. And my youngest, our oldest grandson has just started kindergarten at Alexandria. So we got a third generation going on here. And then my other grandson will start at Alexandria next year at kindergarten. So uh, proud to have that family. Both my daughters grew up really in the broadcast booth from the time that they were little bitty kids. They would go to football games with me, and even to the point sometimes when they were so little, they might take a blanket and a pillow and go to sleep in the floor while I was during the third and fourth quarter when I was broadcasting a ball game. So they kind of grew up with it. Um, as far as how I got in, a pretty interesting story of how I got into broadcasting Alexandria football. Bill Bussey of Rick and Bubba fame was general manager of a radio station in Jacksonville, and he was freshly out of college at Jacksonville State. I was still in college, and Bill and I were friends. And he came up to me one day. He said, "What would you think about getting Alexandria football on the radio?" And I said, "I think that'd be a great idea. Who do you have in mind?" He said, "You." And I was like, "I don't know anything about that." So it was Coach Ginn, Larry Ginn's second year as head coach. Alexandria went all the way to the state championship game. So there were 5 playoff games. At the time, that radio station was carrying Jacksonville high school football. Jacksonville didn't make the playoffs, so they picked up Alexandria in the playoffs. And I traveled with Mickey Shadricks and Mike Carter, who's known as Tex Carter these days. Um, that was the broadcast team. I traveled with them, and I always said it was kind of like the old Monday Night Football where you had 3 men in the booth, and I just kind of uh, learned in those 5 playoff games from those guys. Kind of, got the ropes and whatever. And then the next year started the broadcast. Ed Wright was my first color analyst on the broadcast. He's an old Alexandria quarterback and was the color analyst on the broadcast for 17 seasons, the first 17 seasons that we did. That was kind of how I got started, just by Bill coming to me and saying, "How would you like to get Alexandria football on the radio?" And kind of went from there. And here we are 38 seasons later.
Yeah, that's a great story. And it's always that way. There's always people in radio, same as in coaching, where there's somebody that was inspiring to them. So I'm guessing that you really didn't think about going into radio. What do you think you would have done? Of course, I mean, you own your own business, I think now, but what do you think you would have done if you would have not went into radio?
Well, as far as I tell people the radio part's my fun job. I own a business that I actually started when I was a junior in high school. Had no idea I'd still be doing this. I thought I was getting into something. Most of my friends had a little part-time job, whether it was at a fast food place or sacking groceries at a grocery store, and I was just like everybody else, trying to make a little money to have some gas money or to go on a date or something that on the weekends. And but anyway, so I been very fortunate with that. That's my main business, but kind of fell into the radio part of it, and I've just really enjoyed it.
Does the business you have, does it allow you to break away and be able to spend a little extra time in radio in that it's not too stressful on
You don't have to say that again. Our technology was messing up a little bit there,
you?
Phil.
Okay. Yeah, the business that you own, are you able to easily break away and be able to do all the things that you need to do covering Alexandria football so that it's not so stressful?
Yeah, absolutely. That's another way I've been fortunate is to never really worked for anybody else, and I'm very spoiled because I think once you able to kind of own a business and work for yourself, it's hard to work for anybody else. So and I've also been able to have a great staff that takes care of things when I'm not there. So yeah, especially when you get to playoff time and some of these trips, and Deshler comes to mind up in Tuscumbia, up in the northwest part of Alabama. Made a lot of trips up there, but you have those trips and especially for playoff games like that, you may need to leave at 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday to get there and kind of get your bearings, get things set up, and get ready to go. And so I've been very fortunate to have a real job where I can have some freedom, and then a really good staff that's been able to take care of things so that I can do my fun job.
Well, tell me this, Robert, and I'll move on to something else. Who are some of the guys around you that helps you with your broadcast?
Well, I mentioned Ed Wright a moment ago. Ed was the color analyst for the first 17 seasons, and then Steve Finley followed him and was, I believe he was on the broadcast for 8 seasons. Steve left the broadcast. His son, Chris Finley, got into coaching, and Chris became the head coach at Ohatchee. He's now an assistant and strength coach at Grapevine, Texas. That's some big boy high school football out there at Grapevine and Texas high school football. And then after Steve left, then Todd Ginn was the color analyst for 2 years. And then after Todd we kind of had a little tag team going with Doug Odell, who is now he's principal at Welborn Elementary School and in Anniston, and very involved in the Calhoun County Quarterback Club. And also Jordan Smith joined the broadcast. And then we've made a couple of changes really this year. Landry Roberts, who played for Larry Ginn back in around 2004, 2005 on some of Larry Ginn's last teams. Landry is come on as the color analyst, and Jordan Smith's still with the broadcast. Jordan has bumped his way down to the sidelines. I think he's really enjoying being on the sidelines and getting to experience that. And again, as I mentioned earlier, Todd Ginn, very friendly to our radio broadcast. And so Todd he do an interview with Jordan. He does he comes into the radio booth in the pregame, and then does a couple of interviews during the game. So with Jordan down there on the sideline. So I'm just really proud of the broadcast that we've had. All those guys that I mentioned have done a really good job over the years. And I think that the broadcast that we have right now is as good as any that we've ever had.
Yeah, well, that sounds good. I mean, I enjoy listening to y'all on Friday nights. I kind of thumb through a lot, and a lot of times, I thumb through, and Alexandria's up big, so I don't listen quite as much. But of course, when you get in those big games like Anniston and things like that, you kind of tune your ear in a little bit more to kind of try to find out, because I get a lot from you guys, and that y'all let me know kind of what's going on, and I can kind of share on the air kind of how a game was going when I got to the booth, because a lot of times it don't change. You can tell early in a ball game what both coaches are trying to do, what their game plan is, and then they'll kind of get away from it a little bit, but then they go back to it and make a few adjustments at halftime. So you can kind of get a feel for that. So it's enjoyable to listen to you guys. Well, Robert, over the years, I know you've got to see a lot of great players. Mac Campbell's one of them. The one I always remember is Cleat Forrest. I think he has the greatest name in high school football. If I was to put out a name of players that's played in Alabama, my kicker would be Cleat Forrest, because he has the greatest name. Tell me some of the great players you have seen over the years.
Well, I get these questions, and you're always going to leave somebody out, because there's been so many. There's no way to name everybody that's been a great player over 38 seasons. But with that being said, Mac Campbell obviously comes to mind. I remember when it was the beginning of the 1993 season, we were playing at Jacksonville, started the season playing at Jacksonville. And that was back in the days that Jacksonville State played Jacksonville High School played on Jacksonville State's field at Paul Snow Stadium. So we opened up the 1993 season at Paul Snow Stadium on the campus of Jacksonville State, playing the Jacksonville High School Golden Eagles. And I remember Coach Larry again giving us the starting lineup, and I looked down and we were starting an 8th grader. I'd never heard of this kid. Who's this Mac Campbell kid? He's an 8th grader. And I remember saying that either one or two things was happening. Either this kid was really special, or we'd hit the bottom of the barrel, one of the two, to be starting an 8th grader in the first game of the season. Well, we all know what happened there. Mac Campbell, by the time he finished his final season in 1997, Alexandria had 2 state championships. Mac had set the state record for touchdowns in a career, which I'm going off the cuff here, but I think was 153 touchdowns. And then also set the state record for career rushing yards, over 9,800 career rushing yards before Mac left Alexandria. And you have to start with Mac Campbell. He was Mr. Football in Class 4A. Well, he was 4A Player of the Year, but he was Mr. Football for the entire state of Alabama in 1997. Then we have to throw Todd Ginn in there, who is now Alexandria's head coach. Todd is the winningest quarterback ever at Alexandria. Began starting some games toward the end of his freshman year, and then started his sophomore, junior, and senior years. That overlapped with all but 1 year of Mac Campbell. And with Todd Ginn at quarterback and Mac Campbell in the backfield, Alexandria won a state championship in 1995. Probably would have won another one in 1996, but we traveled out to Fayette County, and it's kind of interesting. That's who Alexandria just beat last Friday night in the playoffs, is Fayette County. But traveled there to Fayette back in 1996, and Mac Campbell had he was a little bit sick that night, but nobody had any idea how sick he was. He played in that ball game. Alexandria lost. The next day, Mac was in UAB and almost didn't make it. He had meningitis and played that ball game with meningitis. So that, that's one of those things, you kind of like the Colt McCoy deal, playing with Texas playing Alabama in the national championship. You can sit here and wonder how would it gone differently had Mac not been sick. But with Mac, with all that happening with Mac, it kind of made us realize that football, after all, is still just a game. It's it gets mighty important to us sometimes, but then when something like that happens and you wind up in UAB and almost don't make it, then it makes you realize that football is just a game. But anyway, Mac came back for his senior season in 1997. Todd Ginn had graduated. Scott Ginn, who's Todd's brother, the middle son of Larry and Janet Ginn, he was the quarterback in 1997. Alexandria won another state championship. And then you fast forward a little bit. I'd be remiss if I didn't throw in Will Ginn at the early 2000s. He was the youngest. Will's the only one of the three boys that didn't win a state championship, but he was an excellent quarterback as well. And then Alexandria went through a little lull. They went through, I think, 7 or 8 consecutive seasons that Alexandria either lost one game in the regular season or went undefeated in the regular season. Went about 5 years without losing at home. It was just an incredible streak. Then in 2001 and 2002, had a little bit of a lull, and had a couple of years, didn't make the playoffs, and then came back strong toward the end of Larry Ginn's career. 4 consecutive trips to the semifinals. Another name in those 4 years that comes to my mind is Chris Evans. Chris Evans was another great running back for Alexandria. He went on to first to UAB, and then when Pat Sullivan left UAB and moved over across town to Samford, Chris followed him over there, and Chris set the record for most career rushing yards at Samford, and his yardage totals, not only a record at Samford, but it would also be a record for any college in Alabama. And Chris is actually being inducted into the Samford Athletics Hall of Fame very soon. And he is back with the Alexandria program. He's very successful in his career, as he's actually Dr. Chris Evans now. But he loves Alexandria. He's back and works with the running backs. And, sometimes I think these kids that Alexandria has that are running backs, I'm not sure they really understand who they have on the sidelines helping them out. But Chris Evans is another name that comes to mind. Jake Welch was a quarterback for Alexandria there at the end of Larry Ginn's career. I remember saying about Jake back in the day, he started for 3 years, and he was a quarterback on those teams that made consecutive trips to the 4A semifinals. I remember saying on the air many years ago that Jake Welch, as a sophomore, played like a senior, and he was that poised as a sophomore. Another really good quarterback for Alexandria. There's just been so many through the years. And then you mentioned Cleat Forrest. Cleat, primarily known as a kicker, started for 6 years. He started from his 7th grade year all the way through his senior year. An excellent kicker for Alexandria. He was just really a weapon. There's not a lot of high school kickers that you can call a weapon, but he really was, because 90% of his kickoffs went into the end zone, couldn't be returned. And that's a weapon in itself when you don't have to worry about the other team returning kickoffs. And then Cleat's at Jacksonville State now. That's just a few. That there have been so many along the way.
Yeah, definitely. There's been some great ones, and that's excluding good, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, good linebackers over the years. There's been a lot of big names at the linebacker position at Alexandria. Well, Robert, tell me this. You've been in the booth for a long time. Is there any real memorable moments where you call games that really stand out, that were really exciting? I'm sure state championship games are great, but name some of the moments that really stand out in your mind that you kind of sort of look back on sometimes.
Well, there have been, I guess maybe the first one that comes to my mind really was my first year. Alexandria traveled up to Deschler, to Tuscumbia, and it would have been in the 4A semifinals, and beat Deschler 27-24 in overtime. That was at the very beginning of broadcasting, but it was really a great game that propelled Alexandria into the state championship game the next week against Elmore County. I remember Howard Snellenberger was there that night, and saw him coming through the crowd. And I mentioned earlier that first year I was just kind of learning the ropes, and the other two guys were doing the play-by-play and the color. And we saw Coach Snellenberger coming through the crowd down there. And so I jumped up, ran down into the crowd, and grabbed Coach Snellenberger, actually beat the Deschler radio station to him, and we had him as a halftime guest. So that's a memorable thing for me. Fast forward to 1995, when Alexandria beat T.R. Miller 18-13 to win the state championship. That one comes to mind. That was, if it wasn't the last year, it was the next to the last year that before the Super 6, and which has become the Super 7. Back in those days, you still played the state championship games at home stadiums, and Alexandria was fortunate enough that it was played at Alexandria. It had rained all week, and the game's kind of called the Mud Bowl, because the whole field, there was very little grass. There was a lot of mud that night. T.R. Miller came in riding I think it was a 28-game winning streak, and Alexandria beat them that night 18-13. I can still remember T.R. Miller driving toward the end of the ball game. A touchdown, even without an extra point, would have given them the lead. And I can remember a great defensive play by Alexandria's Bubba Bright that stopped T.R. Miller on a 4th down and got the football back for Alexandria to win that state championship. I certainly remember that one. People ask me what is the best game that I ever called. I would have to say it was being 2006 at Gunnersville. And I'm pretty sure, Phil, I came by the radio station to see you guys after that. But we played Gunnersville up at Gunnersville, and this was in the regular season. And I've forgotten how many overtimes. I believe it was 4 overtimes. And Alexandria won 56-49 in about 4 overtimes up there at Gunnersville. And, I try to I always say on our broadcast, people I don't want them to doubt that I'm for Alexandria, but I don't try to yell and scream and holler and all that kind of stuff. But that night you couldn't help it. And Alexandria, the time they won that ball game, and again, 105 points put on the board that night. And I didn't have much of a voice headed home. And a funny thing, that game ended up 56-49. Alexandria and Gunnersville played again in the semifinals at Alexandria. So first of all, Alexandria had gone to Gunnersville and beat them, put 56 points on the board. They played again in the semifinals. This time it was at Alexandria, and Gunnersville won that one 24-3. I always thought that was pretty interesting that the first time they played, Alexandria puts 56 points on the board, play again in the semifinals. Gunnersville holds them to 3 points. And then we had one earlier this year that probably doesn't rise to that level, but it was the Cherokee County game that was at Alexandria. And lead changed hands several times. Alexandria went up 21-14. Cherokee County came back, went up 28-21. Alexandria scored 15 points in 20 seconds in the last minute of the ball game and came from behind to win 36-28. And that one was a classic. Again, there have been so many over the years. That's just a few that come to my mind, and one from the very first year and then one from this year.
Yeah, this is some amazing stories. Well, tell me this. I mean, and on the flip side, has there been a couple of games that just kind of broke your heart?
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I'm not, those 4 consecutive trips to the semifinals from 2003 to 2006. That was at the end of Larry Ginn's time as head coach. And Alexandria's nemesis in those days was Deschler. I mentioned beating Deschler in 1987, but Alexandria's had a hard time over the years with Deschler, and there were a lot of trips that some really good Alexandria teams traveled up to Deschler. And by the way, that's one of the coldest places that you can play a football game. But a lot of dreams ended up there. I am of the opinion I would rather lose. If I'm going to lose, I'd rather lose in the semifinals than to lose a state championship game. To me, there's just a little bit of a stigma that goes with getting to the championship game and losing. That's just me. So even though I would have preferred to have lost those games in the semifinals, I also know that Alexandria had some really good teams that, had they won in the semifinals, probably could have added to those state championships. And then, I also go back to that Gunnersville game in 2006 that I talked about. That wound up being Larry Ginn's last game as Alexandria's head coach. Nobody knew it. We didn't know he was going to get sick. We didn't know he was going to have to give it up as suddenly as he did. But that would have been as we sit here and look back to 2006, and hindsight's always 20/20. That would have been really cool for him to have been able to go out as a state champion, as great a champion as he was.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because you want to call your own shot, so to speak, and that's a great way, basically, to end it. Well, Robert, let's talk a little bit. I'll let Howie ask some questions, but I want to talk a little bit about this year's team. Of course, Alexandria has kind of sort of moved its way back to being an elite team again. I mean, naturally, schools are going to have their up and down years, but they're back to that elite level this year. Who are some of the guys, and I know if they're listening, they're going to want to hear their names. Who are some of the guys on this year's team that has really stood out to put Alexandria back to that elite level? Only a 2-point loss to Anniston from being unbeaten, and we know how good Anniston is.
Right. Well, and again, my apologies to you mentioned it a little bit ago. Sometimes the guys that are the sweat hogs, the offensive linemen, and especially they don't, that's where football begins. But they don't get like the guys, the skill players, the pretty boys, as they're known sometimes. But no disrespect to the great offensive linemen and all that. But, we'll start with the quarterback. Cole Wheeler is Alexandria's quarterback. He is in his third season as Alexandria's quarterback. Started as a freshman, and then last year as a sophomore. This year he's a junior, so Cole's got another year coming up. It's been great to see his progression. You could see as a freshman that he had potential, but you got to get out there and you got to get the jitters out. You got to learn, and Cole has really turned into a great leader for this team. I talked to Coach Todd Ginn earlier in the season, and I said, both of us have been around a long time, and Todd's never known a day that he's not been around Alexandria football, and I guess really I don't either. And so we've seen a lot of orange and black football over the years, and I said, Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, but I said, does it not seem that this team has even more weapons than our state championship teams? And he agreed with me. That's not to take anything. I mean, those state championship teams won state championships. This team hadn't won anything, but we do have a lot of weapons. So when we go to some of those weapons, J.J. Beeson lines up in the backfield a lot. He's not a really big kid. He's got a lot of speed, plays with a lot of heart. Ryan Brown lines up at fullback. Alexandria, over the years, all the way back to the Larry Ginn years, always had a really good fullback. And sometimes you get to running outside, you throw a little stab pass and get those corners leaning out, and then you bust it up the middle with that fullback. Well, Ryan Brown is that guy for Alexandria this year. At the wideouts, MJ Morris I believe he started as an 8th grader, still just a sophomore. Evan White comes to mind. He's also a wideout. Alexandria went through a little period a couple of years ago that didn't seem like we had anybody to throw the football to, and now it's great to see those guys come along. Again, I'm going to leave somebody out, but that's some of the guys that come to mind. Alexandria's got a Kaysen Gardner wears number 21. Kaysen has just a nose for if the other team is punting, or if they've got a third down in a situation where they're probably going to have to throw the football. I mean, you better look for number 21. He's got a nose for being in the right spot at the right time, making a big play, makes some big special teams plays as well. That's just, I mentioned that Alexandria has so many weapons this year, but those are just some of the guys that we call their names a lot.
Robert, what is the identity of this football team? Are they very good on the defensive side of the ball? Do they depend mostly on offense? I guess what I'm asking is, if, say, I'm up here at Rainsville and I'm going to see them play, what are we going to see out of Alexandria?
I would probably have to start with the defense for Alexandria that may be a little bit of a surprise, because when Alexandria's put up a lot of points this year, put up 47 against against Fayette County last Friday evening. But Alexandria has a really good defense, and that is I think I remember when Todd Ginn took over as head coach, he told me that, and I'll leave it. Well, I'm gonna finish that thought, but I want to go back to his dad a little bit. But Todd told me that he was, at least for his first year, and this was back in 2018, but he was going to focus on the defense. And and going back to his dad, Larry again, most people, I think, if you asked them, they would say that Larry again was a great offensive coach, and he was, but he was an outstanding defensive coach. I know a lot of kids that have gone on. Chris Finley's one of them. I mentioned Chris earlier. Chris went on and played college ball, and he always said that Larry Ginn was by far the best defensive coach that he ever played for, even in counting his college coaches. So, fast forward from there to where we are now. Alexandria puts up a lot of points, averaging 40 points a ball game. But the defense, I think, is where it really starts. And, I'm kind of from that old school that if they don't score, they can't beat you. And I think that's where things start for Alexandria. And, even to the point that we talked about Cleat Forrest, and he kicked for 6 years. And we were a little spoiled in what I talked about earlier about kickoffs, because 90% of them were going to the end zone for touchbacks. Alexandria doesn't have that this year. And so Coach Ginn's been kicking a probably close to 50% of the time going for onside kicks. Not necessarily to, if you get the onside kick, that say you score, you get an onside kick, the other team can't get the ball back. Well, they can't score if they don't have the ball. It can also demoralize the other team a little bit. It's a little risky. I don't know exactly the stats, but Alexandria's recovered a lot of onside kicks this year. But so that part is a little bit risky. But Coach Ginn said, if we don't have anybody can kick it deep, even if we give the ball up on an onside kick, we may only be giving up about 10 yards, and I trust the defense. And I think that's the key right there. And that's probably why I said what I said about starting with the defense, because when your head coach trusts his defense and has that much faith in them, that he kicks a lot of onside kicks, and, the risks that go along with that, I think that says a lot about the defense.
Well, and also in something like that, you give something for the other team to have to work on, because they're going to look for it every time you guys kick off. And it's one of those headaches that normally some coaches don't have to deal with.
Well, and I'll go back to the game last Friday night with Fayette County in the first round of the playoffs. Fayette County won the coin toss, elected to defer, so they kicked off. And, by the game number 11, it's not a secret anymore that Alexandria's going for a lot of onside kicks. Well, Fayette County gave Alexandria a little dose of their own medicine. They started the game with an onside kick, and they recovered. And I remember at our halftime interview, Coach Ginn said, good grief, we're going to talk about that at halftime, because we practice that so much. Our guys should be ready for that. And so Fayette County kind of gave Alexandria a little dose of their own medicine. But then in the second half, Alexandria not only possessed the ball for an inordinate amount of time, almost the entire third quarter, but they got so many onside kicks that Fayette County only had 2 possessions in the second half. And I'm not sure I've ever seen that. I've seen 3 possessions sometimes, and especially I found over the years and keeping stats that for whatever reason, you normally get more possessions in the first half than you do in the second half. Now, I've seen some of them where a team only had 3 possessions in the second half, but I'm not sure I'd ever seen 2. So between running the ball, controlling the ball, and then getting onside kicks, Fayette County only had the ball twice in the second half. And then that goes back to what I said about if you don't have the football, you can't score, you can't win. And, and again, it's kind of got to be demoralizing because they were behind at halftime, and then you only get the ball twice in the second half. It's kind of tough to overcome those odds.
Well, I want to ask you one more question. I'll turn you over to Howie and let him ask you if you kind of let you off the hook a little bit. That Lou Scale Stadium, one of the best home field advantages for any school. Of course, that always comes in that Alexandria's won a lot of football games there. There's no doubt about that. But what makes that place special? It's Alexandria football. Is it really and truly big time community supported?
It is. The crowd just this past Friday night in the first round of the playoffs, it's always a different atmosphere when you get to the playoffs. There's some electricity in the air, but just to see that crowd, I go back to that Cherokee County game earlier, I believe in October, that I mentioned earlier as being one of the best games that I recall ever broadcasting. That was a really big game for Alexandria on a lot of levels. 2 years ago, when Alexandria had a very un-Alexandria-like 1-9 season, Cherokee County beat Alexandria pretty badly, and so this was a good game for Alexandria to kind of show that we're back to playing Alexandria football, back to where we need to be. And when that game was over, usually by the time we have broken all of our broadcasting equipment down, and we're usually some of the last people to walk out of the stadium. And I remember we had all our stuff taken down. The players were still out on the field. The team was still out on the field. The band played the alma mater with the players singing it, even after we've taken all our broadcasting equipment down. And I would look down into the crowd. And by the way, I kind of draped myself out of the press box to, just to congratulating the guys. I wanted them to see that. But as I kind of looked down and looked in the crowd, I mean, I don't know how many minutes, probably 15 or 20 minutes after the game was over, and probably 50% of the crowd is still there, just taking everything in. And you don't have that everywhere. There's a good many away games that you go to that Alexandria brings more of a crowd than the home team has. But I know your question was about Lou Scale Stadium. I knew Coach Scales, especially I graduated toward the end of his career, but Coach Scales was a really good friend to me. That stadium, when he came to Alexandria, and by the way, he played for Frank Thomas at Alabama, and you'll enjoy this story about Coach Scales. But he played in the Orange, Cotton, and Rose Bowls, and was the only senior on the 1945 team at Alabama that went undefeated. Coach Scales told me he always told him that was because the great senior leadership, but he was the only senior on that team. That's why he told me that's why they went undefeated. But he came to Alexandria at a time that Alexandria had only won 7 games in the 5 years prior to his arrival. And by his 3rd season, Alexandria was undefeated. The stadium at the time was not where the stadium is now. So Coach Scales was the catalyst behind getting that stadium built. And I've heard stories about kids from one side of it was kind of built into the side of a hill. And I've heard stories about the students actually going over there with picks and shovels and cutting into the side of that hill for the stadium to be built. You couldn't do that these days, but that's you could back in those days. I've heard a lot of stories. So I believe it was in 1958 that Coach Scales engineered planting the grass that is still there today. And so just a lot of mystique. I remember probably back in the 70s or the 80s, maybe, the Birmingham News commissioned a survey of coaches from all across Alabama. Where were the toughest places to play in a high school football game in Alabama? And that stadium made the top 10. I don't remember exactly where it placed, but I do remember that it made the top 10. And then it was called Valley Cub Stadium for many years. And then when Coach Scales retired, it was named Lou Scales Stadium. And then after Larry Ginn retired, the field was named as Larry Ginn Field. So just, I know am biased and it's my home, but I hear a lot of people that are not from Alexandria saying if they want to watch a high school football game, that's where they want to go on a Friday night is to Alexandria, and really proud of that.
Yeah, that is a great story. A lot of history, a lot of ghosts, I guess, that gallop that field even on a Friday night now. So, yeah, it's an amazing story how well the school has done. Well, Howie, I'm going to turn you loose and let you grill Robert a little bit and get to know him a little bit more.
Yes, sir. We appreciate your time. We're not going to keep you much longer. We got another show to do not long after this, but we appreciate you taking the time out. And like I said, if I do go to the game Friday night, I will be looking you up, talk to you, going up to the press box, talking to you. But the owner of RiverCity-Media, Randall, he asked a question. He's like, the best player you have saw that was on the other team?
I remember broadcasting when Martin Houston played for Cherokee County, and he went on played for Alabama. I believe it runs together after a while. I don't remember if it's for Bill Curry or for Gene Stallings. Bo Nix, who is now the starting quarterback for the Denver Broncos, was the quarterback for Scottsboro. I remember traveling up to Pat Trammell Stadium in Scottsboro and broadcasting a game up there. And then Scottsboro also came to Alexandria. That was when Alexandria was in 5A. So we're in a region with Scottsboro there for a while. Bo Nix comes to mind. The one of the Good boys, I believe it was Pierre Good, that played at Alabama. Who was Kerry? There was Kerry Good, Pierre, and I think I'm missing one somewhere.
I think it's maybe was it Chris?
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I remember. I believe it was Pierre came into Alexandria one night. They played for Hazelwood, and there were some days back when, especially in the 90s, when Alexandria was really winning, that Coach Larry again had some trouble. They had the region games, but had some trouble scheduling other games because people didn't want to play Alexandria. Hazelwood was only 2A at the time, but they were Hazelwood. You guys will remember how great they were back in the day. They came into Alexandria, and I don't remember the exact score, but Alexandria was ahead. I believe it was 14-0, 14-6, or something like that at halftime. And Kerry Good, I don't remember if it was Kerry. It was one of the Good boys, Kerry or Pierre, one of the two. Absolutely took over the game in the second half, and Hazelwood wound up beating Alexandria that night 44-14 after trailing at halftime. So they kind of made a statement in the second half and showed who was the boss. There have been a lot of them. Those are some of them that come to mind.
Right. Phil asked you about some of the games that you remember and all that. Is there one particular play that sticks out in your mind that you'll say, oh, man, I'll always remember this one play?
It's tough to take 38 seasons and get it down to one play, but if I had to take it down to one play without giving it a ton of thought, I think I've already mentioned it, and that would have been the T.R. Miller State Championship game back in 1995, when, again, T.R. Miller rides in. They've got a 28-game winning streak, seem kind of invincible, make the trip up to Lou Scales Stadium, and just in a driving rain. I've heard a lot of those kids that played in, the kids that played in that ball game are in their 40s now, but I've heard a lot of them talk about never being as cold as they were that night. It was an early December night, and just sheets of rain and playing in the mud, and you're up by 5 points. You got a team that knows how to win with a 28-game winning streak. They're driving for the winning touchdown, and they go for it on 4th and about 2 and run it right up the middle, and Alexandria smacks them in the mouth and gets the football back and goes on to win the football game in the last few seconds. That play right there would probably be the one that comes to my mind first.
Well, that's pretty good after 38 years being able to call that one. I don't want to jinx you, but after 38 years, have you ever missed a game?
I've missed a few along the way, not many. There's been one or two where might have had a death in the family or a family member in the hospital in Birmingham or something like that, but very few over the years.
I want to put you on the spot and ask you which fresh box is the worst one you ever had to work on, but I'm not going to do
that. I could give you some answers, but I'd probably get in trouble.
Absolutely. That's why I'm not going to ask, but me and Phil's done a few ball games together at different places, and not necessarily that they were bad. It was just all of a sudden they don't have room for you because you're with the visiting team.
Yeah, and I think that is probably at the top of my list of things that kind of bother me about broadcasting, because when people come to Alexandria's place, I'd be hard pressed to think of a time that we didn't have room for them, unless you get to a situation where there's 2 or 3. You get into the playoffs, you may have the visiting radio station. You may have somebody doing a game of the week. You may have a TV game, that kind of thing. When you get to that, there's not room. But if it's just for the visiting team radio, Alexandria's always got a place for it. And we don't always get treated like that. And actually, the years that we were in 5A, I think it was worse than in 4A. And I think what has caused that is that, and it's been the proliferation of streaming, kind of what we're doing here tonight that used to didn't exist. And you've got there's some places where one radio station, and you don't even need a radio station anymore, but one radio station may have one signal going out over the air, but they may be streaming 4 or 5 games. And so there's a lot of schools out there that maybe used to not have anybody covering them on a regular basis that have somebody. And I think that was more prevalent in 5A than in 4A. So I guess this is Alexandria's second year back down to 4A after about 10 years in 5A. And there's several reasons I'm glad to be back to 4A. And that's one of them. I just kind of feel like maybe you get treated a little bit better when you go to the visiting school.
Right. I understand that. And Randy does, he's the owner of RiverCity-Media, and he does a lot of Hickson ball games up in Tennessee, but he says bleachers equals visitor booth.
Well, that's true. I mean, I have broadcasted from the top of a gym down at Tarrant one night. That was a December 2nd or 3rd round playoff game. And seriously, we were on top. We were not in the stands. We were not on top of the press box. We were on top of the gym. It was one of those nights very similar to today, that it was just, it's like 70 degrees one day and then down in the 20s and 30s the next day. And I remember being on top of that gym and there being a huge exhaust fan that actually it was one of those that it pulled air into the gym, but when you're on top of the gym, it's blowing out on you on top of the gym. They didn't design that thing with expecting people to be sitting on top of the gym in 25 degree weather in December. But I remember that fan blowing on us. I broadcasted from the back of a pickup truck, actually back 2 pickup trucks together. And that was at a stadium that will remain nameless, but they had plenty of room on the home side, but they put us on the visitor side and there was no power. So we brought a generator and back 2 pickup trucks, and that's where we broadcasted from the back of those trucks. A lot of games from the bleachers. It's just, That's what I tell people. If Alexandria's playing, I'm most likely going to be there.
Right. So, but we appreciate your time. We gotta, you know this. We got a hard out. We got to get out at 6 for our next show. But we appreciate your time. Have safe travels coming up here to Rainsville Friday night, and something we always do for all of our guests is allow our guests to give shout outs before they get going. So if there's anybody you want to shout out or multiple people, right now is the time to do it.
Well, I'm going to be a homer, and I'm going to say the entire Alexandria football team is they. I mentioned earlier 2 years ago, Alexandria went 1-9. It was the worst Alexandria season since 1948 or something like that. We're just not used to that, but to have come in 2 seasons and to be back at 10-1, where Alexandria needs to be, and headed in the second round of the playoffs. And I'll give a shout out to all these guys wearing orange and black this year.
Sounds great. And we'd love to be able to have you back on at a later date sometime and pick your brain a little bit more, get more information from you, because somebody that's been around for 38 years, you've got a lot more stories that we'd love to hear. Oh, he got a phone call. He got a phone call or a text, I bet.
Yeah, probably did. Yeah, because there's a lot of things, naturally, Howie, think about his faith and, and his involvement in the community. We didn't get to cover all that stuff and try to, if he does, he has to go.
He got a lot of background noise. He's back with us.
I can't hear you guys.
Okay. You hear us now?
He'll probably have to leave and come back in, but we need to go ahead and get off. We got the other show to do. So, Mr. Smith, we appreciate you joining us. Have safe travels. So for Robert Smith, the voice of Valley Cub, Alexandria, this is Phil Harris. I'm the Howie Chaney. Good night, everybody.